Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Paperback Possibility Podcast. If this is your first time here, hello, welcome in. And if you are a seasoned listener or viewer, if you're watching on YouTube, hello, welcome back. I hope you're all having a lovely day. Today, Alfie and I are bringing you another review, sort of a book. I don't really ever know what to call what we're doing on the podcast.
It's like a chat, innit?
It's a little chat, a little book chat. And this month, the month of September, we chose the book, or rather you chose the book, The Right Place by Sophia Money-Coutts. And we sat down and we discussed, or we read it, and we're about to discuss what this book was, what it was about, what we came away with, and what's next for the Paperback Possibility Podcast. So, Alfie, we'll start off. I think you have something to address.
Well, I didn't actually read the book. Well, I didn't finish it. I got about halfway. I've been very busy this month with work. I just didn't finish it in time. Nor was I really particularly driven to finish it. I got to about halfway and kind of was like, you know what? I just get it. I don't need to read the rest of this. It's absolutely fine.
The Right Place by Sophia Money-Coutts. I'm just getting up the description on Amazon so we can read it to you. But it is only 99p on Kindle Store if you're watching the day it comes out. And I will go over it a little bit again. It's apparently perfect for fans of Emily Henry. We'll get onto that in a second. But the blurb: escape the grey skies with this gorgeous summery beach read rom-com set in the south of France. If Maggie is living her best life, why doesn't it feel like she's in the right place? From the outside, Maggie Lemon has a perfect life, but she and her husband have been trying for a baby for 5 years and she's exhausted. She's seen countless fertility experts and followed dozens of diets and homeopathic recommendations, and even given up her dream restaurant in London when doctors suggested the stress might be too much. And now her estranged aunt has died, leaving her hotel in Provence to Maggie. It's been years since Maggie visited Le Figuier. I don't know how to pronounce the name of this hotel. We're just going to call it The Hotel. Please, if you speak French, let me know how to pronounce this in the comments. There's a lot of work to be done and she knows she should sell it. But when a disgraced Hollywood actor hiding out at the hotel lends a hand, the load feels a lot lighter. Is it just the chemistry with this handsome stranger, or is it starting to feel like Maggie might finally be in the right place? And this is for fans of Grumpy Ex-Sunshine, Forced Proximity, and Celebrity Romance. So, I want to start off this podcast by saying that this book is a very light-hearted rom-com, easy to get through. I think I read it in about 2, maybe 3 days. It was incredibly fast for me to get through. I really did like it for the genre. I think it was very... It was just easy. It was easy breezy book. I don't love a lot of the things particularly. I just like it. It's just a good book. If you wanted to take a book to the beach, to the seaside, if you were going to sit down and read a rom-com, it's not even really a rom-com. It's more just like a romance. I think the humor in it is very light-hearted. It's not necessarily like a funny book, but it's a fun book.
I didn't think it was that fun either. I just thought it was quite boring.
Or do you want to talk about your impressions?
Yeah, well, for the first half, I didn't think it was very funny. I thought all the jokes and the parts that were supposed to be funny just fell very flat for me. I think mostly because they felt like everybody in this book felt like a stereotype to me. And so all of the jokes just fell a bit flat. I didn't really find much of them entertaining or particularly interesting. The one character that I did find interesting was the aunt, who was estranged and left the hotel. She was the only character that I was like, you've got something about you, got a bit of edge. There's something going on there. But again, a lot of the book is told through flashback as well, which I didn't like. It kept breaking up the pace. And yeah, I just never could quite get into it. And that might be because I had other things going on this month, which just stopped me from getting into it. But I just yeah, when a book just feels like a chore to read. it just felt like that to me.
To be fair, you're not usually a rom-com person anyway,
Not
so
at
you're
all.
definitely not the demographic for it.
No.
That being said, you and I always do agree on one thing, and that is flashbacks. Neither of us are particularly a fan.
Yeah.
This book was very much, as Alfie said, broken up into this is the present, and here is some context that you should probably know if you're going to enjoy this next passage. So there was chapter there, chapter back. It wasn't necessarily like 1.
It felt like that.
There were a lot of flashback. I quite liked the flashback, but if it was more woven in as like her remembering rather than it being like we are now back in time,
it felt
that would have been better to me.
A lot of there are also so much of what Maggie is doing, obviously because she used to be a chef, is working in the kitchen at this hotel, and there would often be, I think, twice, whilst in the first half. I was reading. There was a chapter where she was cooking in the hotel, immediately followed by a flashback chapter where she's cooking in her restaurant, and I just found that very confusing and quite difficult to follow at times because I'd get about 3 or 4 pages into the next chapter and I'd be like, there's another. Jamie is her best friend, who's been her friend forever, who also used to work in that other restaurant. So they're both working in this restaurant in the present. And then it switches to a chapter in the past, and they're both working in that restaurant. And I'm just like, hang on a minute, which restaurant are we in? Because the book doesn't, in my opinion, do that great a job. Because the book,
he's having a think.
Because the book doesn't do a great job of like drawing you in, which is a positive because that means that you can just blast through it really quickly. But you also, if you're like me, I just don't care. And so I'm not paying like loads of attention because I'm not like gripped. And so my mind wanders whilst I'm reading it. And then I kind of zoom back into the book about halfway through a chapter and I'm like, hang on a minute, which restaurant am I in? Who is this person? Is this person in the French place or is this the person in London? I just felt like it was just a bit broken up. And unnecessarily so. I never felt like I really got anything out of those chapters that couldn't have been said in a sentence like, oh, do you remember when we were in this restaurant and we had that horrible boss?
Yeah,
like,
and then you can go into thinking about it.
You can just say that it doesn't need to be a whole chapter of this whole scenario about how terrible their old boss was.
It's definitely worth considering when you come to like a composition of a book, how to sort of integrate flashback.
There is a way to do it, and my opinion, the best way to do it is how memory works in like real life, where it just kind of flashes in and you're absorbed into it, and then you kind of come back into the real world, rather than it being like how chapters are broken up, which is a sort of like event, set up the next event that's going to happen in the next chapter. But before we get to that event, let's just have another chapter that's just a previous thing that's happened that doesn't actually have any sort of impact on the current plot.
It feels like it's filling in the gaps, but
it's just filler.
There's other ways to go about it. I will say the cover is beautiful. I really like the cover of this book. I think it's really pretty. We got it as a Kindle book, so we do not benefit from the cover anyway. It's just going to be something that is sitting on our digital shelf. I thought it was okay. I will say, before we get into sort of like more of a review of it, I rated this book 3-star, as in it's very middle of the line. It's not quite a 4-star read for me. It doesn't quite, as you say, it's not quite as gripping enough for that. As much as it's an easy to read book, it's not, there's nothing in it that for me is something I'm like, wow, that's going to stick with me forever.
Yeah.
Aside from one thing, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but for you, I feel like you can't really rate it because you didn't finish it.
No, I have no place to rate it.
Yeah.
I read half of it and I gave up.
Yeah.
And that is my review.
Yeah.
I read half of it and I gave up. That's what I thought of the book. So, yeah. I would have finished it, I think. I would have been able to push through if I had more time this month, but I just didn't. And it was just one of those things where it was prioritization. Like I wasn't enjoying it anyway. So it was just how it kind of went.
I don't know if I'd necessarily pick up another one of Sophia Money-Coutts' books. I don't know if there was one on sale and I had like a gap in my reading. I've got such a backlog of books at the moment. But if I had a gap, and it was on sale, I probably would end up picking one up. But I wouldn't go out of my way But like I have with Emily Henry, for example, who this book is compared to, I really like the way Emily Henry writes. That tickles something in my brain, and I can go back to that. This was written in third person as well, so if you're a third person reader, that's something to pick up.
I liked that.
I personally prefer first person books.
No, I prefer.
You are a third person.
Yeah, much prefer.
So it was a little bit easier to understand where all the characters were coming from.
Yeah, and just a point on third person. I feel like I get to know Maggie rather than like I am Maggie.
Yeah.
Which
absolutely.
I prefer. I do.
We have the story. It starts with Maggie's aunt, Phil, has passed away. And we are going to France, to this hotel, to sort out the affairs, basically. The plan is Maggie's going to go over for a couple of weeks. She's going to look at the hotel. She's going to get it sold. And then her husband, Mungo, his name is Mungo, by the way.
Which I thought was the name of a dog for like most of the book.
So I've never heard of the name Mungo before. If your name is Mungo and you're listening to this, please let me know in the comments or on Spotify or wherever you're listening. Please let me know. And then Mungo will come over, they'll finish it up and then go back home and continue. Now, they've been trying to make a baby for 5 years to no luck.
Which seems like a really long time.
It happens.
Yeah, I suppose it does
definitely
happen,
happens.
but that feels like a really long time.
Yeah, so keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And as the book is going on and Maggie has that separation from Mungo, there is a lot of discussion with herself. She really starts to think about whether or not
like what she wants
and like what she wants in her life. There is, so for content warnings, there is obviously death, because death is a main theme in the book, considering Phil has passed away. There is talks of childbirth, and I don't know if there is any medical issues apart from fertility issues, so please look up any content warnings for yourself if you feel like there might be something in depth in child care or childbirth or pregnancy that you want to look at. There is some talk of paparazzi as well, and kind of sort of stalking, so that is something to keep in mind. But aside from that, please look up the content warnings for yourself for this book, but those are the ones I particularly noted. So yeah, Maggie has gone over to France and she's having all of these memories and these flashbacks because she spent a lot of her childhood growing up in this hotel at summers, holidays away, and she and Phil really got on really well with like House on Fire. As the book goes on, we learn more about what happened and why she is an estranged aunt. I am going to go into some details as well as we go along. We're not going to do like a sort of spoilers section, but what I will do is integrate. I won't go into depth when it comes to spoilers until we get to the end and we talk about the end of the book. But just keep in mind that if you want a completely clean read through of this and you want to experience it for yourself, please listen to this podcast after you've read the book. But we find out as we read the book that Phil is actually estranged from Maggie because Maggie brought Mungo over to the hotel to meet Phil when Phil was still alive, and Phil did not like Mungo and noted that he was maybe not the right person for Maggie. So what we've got is Maggie, who is assuming she is with the love of her life, and she really does love Mungo at this point. So she's not happy that her aunt, who she cares so much about and thinks so strongly is like her person and they're like kindred spirits, doesn't like the person she's with. What we do is there's like I think 8 years where they don't speak, which is why Maggie feels like she's noted in the will. She is the person that Phil has left the hotel to sort the stuff out. So she knows it's her duty to go over and sort it, and she does so. But what she doesn't expect to happen is that she's going to fall back in love with a hotel. And through all the flashback, which is the point of the flashback, and I do like that it has kind of a heart to it.
Yeah.
She learns that all these things that happened in her childhood led her to this moment. And, you know, when she was cooking back with Phil back in the day when she was like a child to now, she can't let go of this hotel. She can't do it. But the whole time, as much as she's thinking, I can't do it, she knows she has to. This hotel is hemorrhaging money. It's lost so much money and it's continuing. I think it was like £100,000 in debt or euros in debt.
Like that, yeah.
So it's hard. It's going to be hard to try and recoup this money. I can never say that word, recoup. It is, you pronounce the P, don't you?
You do, yeah.
Because I always think it's like a coup. Like,
No,
you know when
not-
you get like
yeah,
people
military
fighting.
coup, yeah.
So, okay, recoup. So she doesn't know how she's going to recoup this money. Meanwhile, she has Mungo talking to her. Now, there is a distance between Maggie and Mungo at the moment, and Mungo is back home having his, like, he's fine, he's doing nothing. Like, he's working, and he's got, like, a big job, which is how he knows some hotel people, which we'll get to. But Maggie is really struggling to just think about what she wants to do with her life. And the distance between her and Mungo is really helping her to have this clarity. And she's realizing more and more that the struggle to have children is a struggle that she's having for the sake of it now. Like, when you've tried so hard to have children for so long, in her eyes, she's only continuing because she's been trying for so long. Like, is it sunk cost fallacy?
Yeah, something like that.
You know, when you've put so much time and effort into something, you may as well continue it just to get to the end point. Well, she is just doing it for the sake of it. Mungo, on the other hand, is really pushing for these children, and they are going to fertility appointments all the time. He's ringing her up and saying, hello, I've booked you an appointment, so you need to be home at this date. We've booked it in with a great doctor. And she's like, right, give me at least a couple of weeks. Like, I need time off. I need time away from this to think. And I'm sorting out this hotel and my aunt's will, and I need to do this. And Mungo is continuously pushing. And this is when we meet the love interest of this story, and his name is Gray. Gray is a Hollywood actor who has been disgraced on a movie set. Again, I'm not going to go into too many details because it's not really important. But he has gone and been disgraced on a movie set, and he is hiding out. He's laying low in this hotel. When Maggie got to the hotel, she realised that the assistant person who was supposed to be in charge in the gap, in the downtime between Maggie getting there and Phil passing away, has not cancelled any of the guests. The guests are still turning up, and Maggie is having to throw together what she can to deal with this. And Gray is one of those people who has either not been cancelled, or his agent basically just turns up and is like, here you go, stay here. So Gray's there. He starts off being like, this is definitely Grumpy Sunshine, but also kind of giving enemies to lovers trope, but not really.
I mean, they're not enemies for very long.
They're not, it's literally like a very quick meeting through a door. Maggie says, come for dinner, and Gray says, no, go away, don't want to speak to you, leave me alone.
And she's like, he's so rude.
And of course, she laments on that because, you know, she's just been told that to go away, basically, by this person. And she's having a hard time of it. She doesn't get on with Gray. She's trying to get through her guests. So she invites her best friend Jamie to come out and stay. And
what a trope
this is my first issue with the book. And I will say, Jamie definitely mellows as we get on. But when he comes in, Jamie is a gay character, but he's the sort of like massive stereotypical gay best friend. And I feel
like we're so past that.
That's
by
what
now.
I'm thinking.
And I think a lot of the comic relief in this book comes from him.
From Jamie,
and I don't love that because there are two types of, in my opinion, harmful gay male stereotypes in media. And that is the villain and the comic relief. And that, for years, decades, that's all they've been able to be. You look at Moriarty and Sherlock. Clearly, he's not like outwardly gay, but the way that he moves around, the way that he's very feminine, and he's very like, ooh, and he does all that stuff, which is just so ridiculous. And he's like the villain. He's supposed to be like, oh, this guy's so crazy. Like, look at him. Look at how feminine and weird he is, which is very like offensive in itself. And then you have the other side, which is the gay best friend in so many different shows aimed at like probably older teenage women who have that character who is just like, who's literally there just to be funny and to provide, like the character in Mean Girls, I don't remember his name. Damien. He's a great example. His whole purpose is to make jokes and to be gay and to be this like masculine figure that the female characters can lean on, but it's fine because he's gay. So like we don't have to worry about it. and they never have their own real story or anything that's going on. They just kind of exist as what they are. And Jamie is, from my reading of 50% of the way through this book, that's exactly what he was. And I just think, come on, man, we're so past this by now.
Unfortunately, I completely agree. I will say, I noticed towards the end of the book, Jamie, I said mellowed out, but it's not like he's calmed down as a character. It's like the way he's written is not like a
he's like an
person.
actual human person.
Like, like he's well-rounded, and there's like so much more to him than just being this character or a caricature of a character. And he's a really good best friend figure. It's just as soon as we see him, he's so loud, and like it is the sort of like flamboyance. And I feel like he could 100% have been that without mentioning his sexuality, or alternatively, he could have had his sexuality. He's a gay character and not been flamboyant and loud.
Yeah, and just be a normal man,
exactly.
like a normal person, like a person who actually exists.
Which is not to say that people cannot be gay and flamboyant or loud or feminine or whatever.
But what we're talking about is leaning into stereotypes of people.
It's a massive stereotype. And as you say, it's been in media for years and years.
Decades.
And I was so shocked to open this book.
In 2024, we're still doing this.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just, I can't get on board with that. If you're going to put a character in a book, make them a person. Yeah. Like, make them a character, something that, and they bring something to the story. But he's a gesture in the idea of a person. Like, that's what he is, and that's it. It doesn't have anything else. At least not in the first half of the book.
No. It's such a shame, but we'll move on from that. And the book was published on the 29th of July, 2024. I haven't seen any reviews that are talking about the stereotypical nature of it. There are a couple of 1-star... There's 3 1-star reviews on Amazon, but they have no actual...
No one's written anything.
Writings, same as 2-star reviews. There are a lot of 3-star reviews, but actually the majority of them are 5 stars.
There's a 4.5 out of 5 on Amazon.
Yeah, I definitely think...
Which is unbelievably high.
This was one review by JLMC. The characters are easy to like, with the exception of the stereotyped Mungo and Maggie's mother. I do feel like both of those were stereotypes, but that's not the stereotype that
we're talking about. But they are. And this book is kind of full of those.
But then you argue that this is a rom-com, this is a romance book. It's really hard in romance to step out of the stereotype.
Well, that's true, and that's one of those. But yeah, I suppose. But to me, that's you don't get points for staying in.
No, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the thing I like about Emily Henry's writing, is that everything is a stereotype, but not necessarily the characters. No. Like the characters feel well-rounded, they feel like people, but
you can write a good and evil story in any genre. In a fantasy genre, you can write good and evil. If you make the characters people who actually have real feeling in
and
them depth to them, and they're real and they feel like genuine people, then that's that you can kind of rise above, even if you are just still on the same track. That's fine. But when the characters don't have any depth, the plot is the same. What do you call it? Grumpy Sunshine.
Yeah, Grumpy Sunshine.
It's Grumpy Sunshine. As any other one, then you're just kind of like, well,
what's different?
What are we doing here?
Why are we picking up this
What's
book?
the point of this? Yeah.
I think that another thing that I leaning into the stereotype is when Mungo sort of starts to learn about Gray being involved in the hotel, because Gray's staying in the hotel. He's trying to lay low, and because he's trying to lay low, he makes this decision as he's going to help out around the hotel, and he's going to start doing like odd jobs and bits and bobs.
Yeah.
And firstly,
that's because he feels bad about being rude to her.
It's half that, but half because he like wants something to do while he's laying low.
Yeah.
That is a stereotype in like the genre that I don't mind, because it's like a stereotype of the genre.
And he has reason for being
Yeah,
that
he
way.
does have reason,
Like,
absolutely.
it's explained, I am like this because of this.
Yeah.
And, like, that's fine. I believe that reason.
But leading into the stereotype as well, when Mungo comes over, because Mungo does eventually come over to the hotel, because of the industry he works in, he manages to find a buyer for the hotel. So this is all like ticking over in the meantime. Maggie says to her lawyer, wait, don't worry about what's going on here, because my husband is actually, and she is married, my husband has found this thing. She's kind of having these thoughts about Gray as she's going along, but she's like, no, I'm married, it's fine, I'm not gonna think of this is, push it out of my mind. But there's something there that the second Mungo comes over, and if we already hadn't had the ick from Mungo, we're gonna get it now.
Absolutely.
He comes over to the hotel and immediately is like, I'm the most jealous person in the world, this is not okay, this friendship is not happening. And at this point, to any outward look, it is a friendship, like 100%. Jamie's teasing Maggie about it all, being like, are you sure it's just a friendship? But it is, right? No one's acted on anything. They haven't shown any feelings for each other. But Mungo immediately starts acting up and being like, oh, how could, like, this can't happen, this relationship can't happen. And I don't love that, but that's not a criticism of the book, that's a criticism on Mungo because he's being ridiculous. And not to mention, at the same time as all of this is happening, he's still pushing Maggie to have this baby. And there's one night when Mungo comes to visit and he's like, right, should we get trying then? Should we just start trying? And Maggie's like, basically physically repulsed by this and is like, no, I don't want to. Please leave me alone. This is not what I want. And she's thinking about it overnight. Gray, at the same time, is having issues with his own life, and the hotel becomes more and more of a known point of where he is. So there is a paparazzi storyline that is introduced as well. Do you remember what the last thing was that you read up to in the book?
No.
Okay, so I'm not...
They took a drive in town.
Yeah.
Her and Gray together.
Yeah.
And Gray was like, well, he's being all like, I'm teasing and stuff.
Yeah.
But I know, I don't really remember.
So, as Alfie says, they went into town to get some bits and pieces for some of the guests that were staying to make food.
Yeah, okay, that sounds about right.
And it is really... Their banter is really nice. I like seeing Maggie and Gray together. Again, some people on these reviews are saying I really want a sequel. I don't think I'd read a sequel. I wouldn't pick one up. But I do think that there is a good grounding point for Maggie and Gray. I think they do seem quite good together. We'll say that much.
Mm-hmm.
One thing with constant storyline that's going through is they don't have the money to fix up this hotel. So regardless of what's going to happen, regardless of Maggie's feelings, she needs to sell it. It turns out that one of the guests staying there might be able to help, not kind of financially, but sort of financially, as he is a person who knows a lot about the world. And the hotel has a lot of books, and he's nosing through the books. And there is something that happens later on, which we won't go into. We don't need to go into the details to talk about the book, but they do end up getting the money for the hotel. Which leads Maggie into a bit more of a difficult position. Now I have to make a decision. Am I staying? Am I going? What's going on? And this journey that we follow is the journey between Maggie deciding to stay with Mungo, to stay trying for a baby, whether or not Gray is something she might want in her life, and that you've got like a side story with Jamie trying to find love in France as well, and he obviously has to go back home. He works in marketing now, I think. He shifted out of the chef job. And again, I do think Jamie's character does get more and more well-rounded as we go along, which is really nice to see, that he doesn't stick to the stereotypical character throughout the whole book. One thing I do want to talk about is at the end of the book, which is... This is where I'm going to talk about a little bit of spoilery territory. So again, if you haven't read it, this is the time. So 90% of the way through the book, 90% of the way through, there is an incident.
Unforeseen incident.
An unforeseen incident. Maggie and Gray, at this point, Maggie has ditched Mungo. She's like, we are getting a divorce. We are not this is it, it's not working.
Yeah.
And Gray is very much not with his partner as well, or so we think. And they sleep together.
Well, hey.
The next morning, they were, and it, by the way,
Is it spicy?
it's not spicy. It's literally just, they have slept together next morning. And when they wake up, Maggie realizes that Gray's not there. And he has just left. He's left the hotel. He's not there.
Goodness.
This is, again, 90% of the way through the book. By 96%
the drama
of the book, it is resolved.
Goodness, great.
So,
What's that, like 5 pages?
But that, no, it's like 20 something.
Okay.
But that 6% of the book was actually like, it's stressful because as a reader and you're like in the rom-com thing, you don't want to be stressed. You want to be like,
relaxed.
This is so lovely. And if this had happened at like 60, 70, 80% of the book, even pushing 80, but 90%, but Gray goes home, sorts all the stuff out that he needs to sort out and comes back. And
Oh, is that it?
yeah, almost. At 96% of the book, he comes back and he's like, right,
He's like, sorry I
This is
left, but I had to go and divorce my wife.
yeah, essentially.
That's terrible. Why would you do that?
So-
It's like, sorry I didn't tell you that that's what I was doing. I just needed to, like, inject some drama into this story for no reason.
It basically was, at this point of the book, a newspaper article was released that says that his partner, his girlfriend, they're not married, but his girlfriend is pregnant.
Right.
And he has to go and sort out this issue.
So he went home and murdered them.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. So he goes home, he leaves his wife, or girlfriend, sorry. It's not his baby anyway, is what it transpires to be.
Bum.
So it's not his
Double drama. Goodness gracious.
And when
20 pages.
and we go back, it's all sorted, it's all nice. I have to say, this book was very, very speedy to read. It was good in the sense it's a 3 out of 5 for me personally. I do think it was a good read. I probably won't read it again. I've said before when we've read like sort of like easy breezy books that I will go back to it after some time.
Yeah.
This is not one that I think I will probably pick up again.
I think if you have your comfort food and it's this, and this is your comfort food read, I think that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
What it's supposed to be. That's who it's for. And that's who all these 5-star reviews are for.
Yeah.
Because it's this is what they like.
Yeah.
The people who like this, they like this. It's what
I will say, if you are someone who has a Goodreads or you have a book list and a TBR and you just want to get through it, put this book on it. You will read it in no time. It is so fast. You will have a good time. You might enjoy it more than I did. I'm sure it's definitely a book that it's hitting it for a lot of people. And that's fine. And that's because it's got every sort of definition of the genre.
that you could want.
And that's perfectly
but why
okay.
did I like Beach Read and I didn't like this?
I personally think Beach Read, all the characters were well-rounded. And I think you could immediately see yourself in that position. I can't remember if Beach Read was first or third person.
It's first.
That's why I like Emily Henry, because it's the first person. And I think as well, when you have such a fewer cast of characters, they have to be more well-rounded.
Yeah, I just
smaller
believe.
cast of characters.
I guess I just believed them all.
Yeah.
I believed the situation more. I felt like, yeah, you're right. Like I knew those people better.
Yeah.
The only character I really felt like was a real person in this story is Maggie, and Phil kind of, but she's like a ghost.
Yeah.
In the hotel, which is cool.
Well, she's not a ghost.
But you could you
ghost.
imagine if she did that though? If like instead of all these like ridiculous like full chapter breaks of like, remember when this happened, everyone, and I'm like, well, no, because I wasn't there. But like, instead of do it naturally. Have Phil like appear as an apparition to Maggie. Be like, I told you about that Mungo, and you didn't listen, and now look where you're at. And she's like, oh no, and that would have been like, whoa, this is cool. But it's just not that. It's just like we're just going to the chapter is finished, so now I'm going to read you a chapter where Phil was as Phil was, and now you know what Phil was like, and now we're back to the story.
Let's not forget that Alfie's favourite genre is horror.
Yes, well, but you know, there's things you can do to make stories more interesting, and there are things that you can do to make them not interesting. And I think this book kind of lent towards them.
Do you want to know how it ends?
I'd love to. Is it that Phil comes back as a ghost and kills Mungo?
Yes, it is.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's not. So the way the book ends is Right, I will say this is my favourite part of the book. Not the ending, but sort of the ending. Maggie, over the course of the book, has realised that she doesn't actually want to deal with, like, she doesn't want the children thing. Like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But she doesn't want to be forcing it, and that's what Mungo is sort of, like, been making her go for. The epilogue of the book is 3 years later. It just ends, and then it's 3 years later.
I hate that so much.
It's not my favourite. But the epilogue is also...
Just end the story when it ends. Like...
The epilogue is also, like, told in present tense. It's like... Maggie realizes that
and this is how I met your father.
Yeah. And they're in a limo and they're on the way to a premiere.
Okay.
And as I say, one of my favorite things about this book is Maggie realizing that she doesn't need children to feel full as a person. Like, she has the hotel. That wasn't supposed to be a pun, but she feels like satiated in her life, and she's content and she's happy. And I think that's
that's great.
Really good thing. And I think that if we had more of that in this book. I'd read way more. Yeah. I love that. And another like nice touch is that Gray has always wanted to be a screenwriter, and this is sort of like webbed in through the book, so it's not like a shock. But he has decided to write a screenplay on the hotel and the history of the hotel.
Oh, fun!
Because this hotel is basically like a kind of debaucherous. I do not know how to say that word either. Debaucherous. Decadent. But it's a bit naughty. Like, this hotel's like...
It's a bit naughty.
I can't say the
word. Bad hotel.
Bad. But it's something that you
have... it's like a hideaway for celebrities where they can all, like, go through their, experience their wildest fantasies and, like, don't worry about the paparazzi kind of thing.
That is exactly it.
Which is, again, great idea for a horror novel.
Yeah.
Not really so much of, like, cozy romance, but...
There are so many different elements to the story, and I think the epilogue was really nice to know that that's what had happened, but I also don't think it was needed. I think if we'd have known that was the direction it was going in, that would have been enough. So, like, we'd sort of found out, I think... No, we hadn't. We knew that he was interested in writing screenplay, but we didn't know that he'd actually committed to it, because in the epilogue... Maggie comments on the fact that they didn't know that he'd been writing for months. Like, he'd hidden the fact that he'd been writing for months. But he had written the screenplay based on the hotel and how it started and the history of the Duke who'd set it up. And The Duke. And it was... I really like that, but I also think that we don't need an epilogue for that. We could just have a, thinking to the future kind of thing woven in at the end.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think everyone's different. My, again, personal preferences, I don't like flashbacks. I don't like epilogues. But that's okay. Because...
Well, I don't mind an epilogue if Lord of the Rings, great epilogue. Epilogue like that, where like the story just sort of doesn't end, and then it's like, oh, by the way, it's 5 years later.
Yeah.
Don't like that. Lord of the Rings is like, this is the end, and then this is what happened after the end, and then this is what happened after that end.
But I definitely think that it was, just not to my taste. But that is basically the book. Summed up. This podcast has been me talking for 40 minutes straight, so I hope you're okay with that.
I didn't read it, so I'm fine with it.
I would really like to give Sophia Money-Coutts... I've talked myself around it, this podcast. I'd really like to give it another go.
I'm going to read it again,
Not this book. Not this book, but like another one of her books. She only published this at the end of July this year, 2024, but she's got like so many more books that are out, including Looking Out for Love.
Their covers are great. Who does those? Is it the same person who does Emily Henry's ones?
They're so similar to the Emily Henry covers.
Yeah.
I actually don't know how I'd find out on the Amazon page, so I think I would need to have a look into this. But yeah, I highly recommend, if you like pretty covers, these are so colourful, it's so modern as well. Like, if you look at the genre of rom-com now, and they look quite similar, but this is they look similar because they look nice. Like, it's so nice and floral and kind of cartoony.
Gives you the whole thing.
But people don't like cartoony covers either.
They're not. People don't like any covers.
Yeah,
everyone has something to say. They hate that. Oh no, I don't like that.
Do you know what my least favourite covers are?
What's that?
The ones that have real pictures on.
I don't mind that.
No, I don't like movie tie-in covers. I don't like real people on covers.
I don't mind movie tie-in covers.
But I don't like imagine it. I want to imagine it.
My favourite cover is blank, just the title of the book.
What colour?
Whatever mood the book is. Like Lord of the Rings, green. Green cover, Fellowship of the Ring. That's all it needs to be. That's what I want from every cover in any book. But people, you can't judge a book. People won't judge any books. If you can't judge a book by its cover, there's no cover to judge it on.
That's true.
But I think that's the best. That's when a book looks the best.
Would you pick a book up off the shelf if you hadn't?
If every other book has bright, colourful colours and there's one book that doesn't have a cover, that's the one that stands out to me. And that's what I'm picking up to look and see what it's about.
Interesting. Anyway.
But no one will do that because no one's brave enough.
We have
Idiots.
this podcast. This podcast is the Paperback Possibility Podcast. And why is it called that, Alfie?
Because I'm going to give you books to choose from.
Cool.
And that will be the possibility of our paperbacks.
Yeah, so every month we sit
Here
down
I go.
and Alfie or I, depending on who's hosting, well, I say hosting, but depending on who is writing the options, we've got 2 things to choose from. Alfie's given me 2 choices today, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to tell you what the answers are, what we're going to read next month. What the answers are. I'm getting confused. We're apparently in a kind of mood of school. I don't know. Alfie is currently Googling, which is...
Well, I'm trying, but the internet's not...
Our internet is a little bit shocking. We are looking particularly this time round at some horror-y books.
Spooky books.
Because it's going to be October, and I think it's time that we sit down and we read some spooky things.
Absolutely. Right, these are one... So I've read one of these. I read this about probably 2 years ago. And I really, really liked it. And they've just released the movie adaptation of
now?
it. Like, not now, but like very recently. And so I'd like to read it again and then watch it to see how it lines up. The other one is...
You didn't say what it was, by the way.
Yeah, I know, I'm not going.
Okay. Sorry.
Give me a minute.
Whoa.
You've been talking this whole time. The other one I've been wanting to read for ages, but I've just not got around to it. So the first one, which I have read, is called The Watchers by A.M. Shine. Recently adapted into a movie directed by M. Night Shyamalan, who I don't like as a director. That's a story for time.
Don't check out Alfie's movie podcast.
Yeah. So, The Watchers. You can't see them, but they can see you. This forest isn't charted on any map. Every car breaks down at its tree line. Mina's is no different. Left stranded, she is forced into the dark woodland only to find a woman shouting, urging Mina to run to a concrete bunker. As the door slams behind her, the building is besieged by screams. Mina finds herself in a room with a wall of glass and an electric light that activates at nightfall. When the Watchers come above ground, these creatures emerge to observe their captive humans, and terrible things happen to anyone who doesn't reach the bunker in time. Afraid and trapped among strangers, Mina is desperate for answers. Who are the Watchers, and why are they keeping the humans imprisoned, keen to watch their every move?
I love the sound of that.
That's The Watchers.
That sounds so good.
I've
never heard
tell
of that
you
before.
that I loved it when I read it the first time.
Do you remember much of it?
I do, but I liked it so much that I'd like to read it again and get it fresh in my mind for when, you know. This is The Witch of Tin Mountain by Paulette Kennedy. In Depression-era Arkansas, something wicked has come to a haunted mountain town in a novel of uncanny suspense by the author of Parting the Veil. Blood and power bind 3 generations of women in the Ozark Mountains. So does an evil that's followed them across the decade. 1931. Gracelyn Doherty lives peacefully on Tin Mountain, helping her adoptive granny work her cures. Despite whispers that the women are witches, the superstitious locals still seek them out, whether to remedy arthritis or a broken heart. But when evangelist Josiah Bellflower comes to town promising miracle healing, full bellies, and prosperity, his revivals soon hold Tin Mountain in thrall, and Granny in abject fear. Granny recognizes Josiah. 50 years ago, in a dark and desperate moment, she made a terrible promise. Now Josiah, an enemy, has returned to collect his due. As Granny sickens and the drought-ridden countryside falls under a curse, Gracelyn must choose: flee Tin Mountain and the only family she knows, confront the vengeful preacher whose unholy mission is to destroy her.
I love the sound of both of those.
Yeah.
They're so good. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Now, The Witch of Tin Mountain is 4.3 out of 5 stars.
Yep.
The Watchers is 4.3 out of 5 stars. There are half the amount of ratings though.
Yeah,
for the Watchers.
Yeah, Wichita Mountain's quite weird. Watchers is 281 pages, and I believe Wichita Mountain is 320. So minimal in terms of, so basically the same length, basically, but two different kinds of horror, but it's both like foresty horrors, which is like one of my favorite.
Did you know the Watchers have a sequel?
The Watchers does have a sequel, which I have not read. From my memory of the Watchers, Were
you happy with the ending?
I was very happy with the ending,
right?
But don't read that.
Oh,
That spoils what goes on.
on.
She's just opened up the blurb for the sequel.
To be fair, I didn't read it. I was just having a look, having a little nosy at the book. But I think I would like to choose the Watchers.
Perfect.
I am very excited to give this a go. Like my whole like thing, I really like it when you're sort of like trapped in a place.
Yeah. The Breakfast Club, but scary.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's how we're branding this, everyone. Stay tuned. But thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for letting me join you.
If you do want to join along with us, have a read of the book that's upcoming for the next month, The Watchers, please do, or at least watch the movie. Let's have an experience and chat about it together on the next podcast, which is every 22nd of the month. We've got October, which is going to be The Watchers. We've got November. November, maybe we'll do something a bit autumnal, and then Christmas book for December, obviously.
Yeah.
So if you have any suggestions for those, do let us know in the comments either on YouTube or Spotify. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it so much. Or listening, if you were listening. Thank you so much, Alfie, again for joining onto the stream today. I'm Ashleigh.
I am Alfie.
And we will see you next month on the 22nd. Thank you so much again, and we'll catch you soon.
Bye.